In the 1990s, tucked away beneath a quiet cottage in the sleepy English village of Scole, something was happening that defied all conventional understanding. It wasn't a haunting, at least not in the traditional sense. It wasn't a scientific experiment either, although many scientists were involved. It was something in between. A gathering of mediums claimed they had found a way to pierce the veil between life and death. Over 5 years, they documented glowing orbs, disembodied voices, levitating objects, and even photographic evidence of spirits. This was not a fringe sideshow hidden from public view. The Scole Experiments were attended by researchers, scientists, and members of the Society for Psychical Research. But as strange as all that sounds, what if there was something even more unnerving going on? What if these so-called were not just spiritual exercises, but the opening of a dimensional portal? And what if, as some believe, intelligence agencies were watching and even interfering? The Scole group was made up of 4 core members: Robin and Sandra Foy, and Alan and Diana Bennett. These were not random hobbyists. They had long been involved in spiritualist circles and were deeply committed to the idea that consciousness survives death. Their goal was to make contact with the other side. But unlike typical mediumship, the phenomena they began to report were physical and immediate. Light anomalies danced through the darkness. Objects materialized out of thin air. Some hands reached out of nowhere. Spirit voices boomed in the room with no visible source. On the surface, this sounds like spiritualism on steroids, but the Scole group believed they were being guided by a team of non-physical intelligences. These beings referred to themselves as the Spirit Team, and they claimed to come not from the afterlife as we understand it, but from higher dimensions or alternate vibrational states. The experiments took place in total darkness in a converted basement beneath the Foy's cottage. Candles were extinguished. Mobile phones, watches, and any form of modern technology were banned. The reason given was that electromagnetic interference disrupted the spiritual energy. That alone raised some eyebrows. Servers, including scientists from the Society for Psychical Research, were allowed to witness sessions under strict protocols. Yet, crucial tools such as infrared cameras were not permitted. According to the mediums, such devices would shut down the manifestations. This created a paradox. In order to witness the impossible, one had to leave behind the tools of verification. And yet, those who entered the room often came out convinced that something very real had taken place. More than 100 different witnesses observed the Scole sessions over the years. Some were believers, but many were skeptics. One nuclear physicist, Dr. David Fontana, described witnessing light orbs that moved with intelligence and purpose, dancing around the room before entering people's bodies and emerging from their chests. Others described unexplained touches from invisible hands, cold breezes that came out of nowhere, objects flying through the air, a glass dome that levitated and rotated in midair while being tapped by unseen forces. In one case, a communicator claiming to be Thomas Jefferson spoke in a clear American voice. In another, a hand made of light appeared and pointed at guests. Some called it the most compelling evidence of life after death ever recorded. And then there was the film. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Scole Experiments involved sealed photographic film rolls. The rolls were brought to the room, sealed in packaging. No one touched them except the observers. During the session, the rolls would remain untouched in a locked box. When developed, they contained strange images. Some showed ancient symbols, alchemical glyphs, and undecipherable writing. Others revealed ghostly faces, entire paragraphs of text, or strange landscapes that no one could explain. The images were often symbolic, sometimes apocalyptic, and deeply unsettling. Skeptics questioned the methods, but none could definitively prove tampering. The idea that unseen forces could project images onto unexposed film without physical contact shook even hardened scientists. As the phenomena became more elaborate, the spirit team began to share what they claimed were instructions for building devices. One such device became known as the energy box. It was a handmade contraption composed of quartz, crystals, copper, magnets, and other natural materials. Tia's spirits claimed this device helped amplify their ability to manifest physically in our dimension. Some theorists believe this energy box was more than just spiritualist theater. They suspect it may have been a crude form of interdimensional communication technology, similar in principle to radios, but operating on frequencies beyond human perception. Others think it resembled orgone devices developed by Wilhelm Reich, or technologies hinted at in suppressed Nikola Tesla experiments. And here is where the story takes a darker turn. According to some reports, interest in the Scole experiments reached the highest levels of British intelligence. There are rumors, unconfirmed but persistent, that MI5 or other defense agencies sent operatives to observe the sessions. Why would a government agency be interested in? The answer may lie in what the spirits were allegedly saying. They spoke of the malleability of time and space. They hinted at the existence of parallel realities and entities not bound by physical laws. They claimed the mind, properly tuned, could travel through dimensions. These ideas were not new to intelligence communities. During the Cold War, the CIA ran remote viewing programs. They explored psychic warfare, consciousness projection, and telepathic spying. Scole may have simply been the next phase. Some now believe the Scole experiments were a continuation or perhaps an offshoot of classified psychic research. Instead of using trained military psychics, like in Project Stargate, Scole used spiritualists, but the goal may have been the same: to tap into non-local consciousness and extract information from beyond the physical world. This opens up disturbing questions. Were the mediums being used without their knowledge? Were the spirit messages being manipulated by outside forces? Could some of the phenomena have been created using hidden technology to simulate supernatural contact? There were strange inconsistencies. At times, the spirit voices contradicted each other. Some spoke of universal love and harmony. Others warned of dangers, described catastrophic timelines, or issued cryptic messages that sounded more like psychological programming than spiritual wisdom. Some voices were mechanical, as if synthesized. Others seemed to parrot familiar phrases without substance. Could this have been evidence of something else? Perhaps not spirits, but artificial entities, machine-generated consciousness, synthetic telepathy. These are no longer science fiction concepts. Today, DARPA is investing in neural interface technologies. Decades ago, similar work was being done in secret. Tia, Scole may have been the testing ground. Then, in 1998, the experiments stopped. The team claimed they had been warned by the spirit team that it was no longer safe to continue. The implication was clear. Someone had taken notice. The spirit communicators said darker forces were now aware of the sessions and had begun interfering. The group disbanded shortly after. No formal explanation was given. The basement was sealed. The equipment was packed away. It began as a mission to prove the afterlife ended in silence, suspicion, and fear. The official narrative presents the Scole experiments as an extraordinary chapter in spiritualist history, but the unanswered questions remained. Why were so many observers convinced by what they saw? Why were cameras banned? Who built the devices? And what was the real purpose behind the images imprinted on the film? Theories abound. Some believe it was all a masterful fraud. Others are convinced the group made real contact with non-human intelligences. And a growing number believe something even more complex happened. That the Scole experiments began as a spiritual endeavor, but were hijacked by forces with a far more strategic agenda. If interdimensional contact was established, even briefly, what else may have come through? The spirit team spoke of beings who existed in other realities, but not all of them were benevolent. Some were described as parasitic or deceptive. They fed on emotion and chaos. As more contact was made, the more unstable the sessions became. Were the spirits warning the team to stop? Or were they being silenced by something else? To this day, the full records of the Scole Experiments are incomplete. Audio tapes, photographs, and transcripts exist, but many details remain hidden or undocumented. The remaining participants rarely speak of it. Some have vanished from public view. The Society for Psychical Research published a cautiously worded report, offering no firm conclusions. And yet, the fascination persists. The Scole Experiments may have been more than just a series of may have been the first successful attempt to engineer a communication link with intelligences outside our known universe. Whether those intelligences were the souls of the dead, entities from other dimensions, or simulations created by classified technology, we may never know. What we do know is that something happened in that basement. Something that made scientists question their understanding of reality. Something that made spiritualists fall silent. Something that made governments curious, if not concerned. And whatever it was, it didn't end. It simply disappeared.